Mel, 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 mel. Everybody, I'm Cantonese Cat. Hey everyone, Cantonese Cat here. I want to go through what my thoughts are about different miners if I can. Now that I figure out how to make timestamps, I'm actually just go ahead and make a longer video and try to put as much as I can in it, as much as thoughts as I can in it until I'm completely exhausted. Then I might chop it up into a separate video as a result. But I do want to focus a little bit about Mara. Mara has been a stock that we've been focusing a lot on here on this channel. And it also had the added benefit of having had a full Bitcoin cycle previously, has gone through a Bitcoin halving previously. And there's also a little bit of an interesting pattern I'm seeing from last cycle to this cycle too that I can extrapolate and try to figure out, what's going on. So first of all, I just want to say that Mara has been dropping, really over the last 8 weeks or so. It hasn't been fun for people who are holding Mara. It's really done nothing over the last 3 or 4 months. And a lot of people end up buying the top of the range, and now that we're at the bottom of the range, people are really freaking out. And whenever you get to the bottom of the range, you're going to end up having a lot of fear. Whenever it gets to the top of the range, you're going to end up having a lot of people who gets, you really kind of euphoric. But the question remains that there are some broader questions that have been asked a lot, and I'm hearing a lot. Have the cycle topped? Is this the top of the cycle? Is Bitcoin has it already topped now that it's already kind of hit the top again from its previous all-time high, its former all-time high, and now it's kind of dropped down a lot. And then on top of that, you also have these Bitcoin proxies, including a lot of the Bitcoin miners really that have been severely underperforming, and there are a lot of people wondering a lot of different things, whether or not these proxy, because of the huge dilution that they have, they're just never going to catch up to Bitcoin again. Bitcoin forms an all-time high, and these miner proxies, they're just not anywhere near that. Are they ever going to catch up? Is this it for these miners? Should I just go ahead and sell this and buy MSTR? You have all kinds of people, or should I just sell this and buy like Bitcoin ETFs and just get exposure from that? There are a lot of people with a lot of different kind of speculations. How is this related to the overall stock market? S&P 500 also seems to be toppy, or you're really talking about a lot of potential weakness. You have some world conflicts that are going on and maybe shaking out things a little bit more. You have VIX that has really just gone on like 20-25% up. A lot of people have a lot of fears. So I just wanted to kind of talk a little bit about all these things. First of all, I already spent quite some time yesterday talking about my thoughts on Bitcoin. If you want to check out my thoughts on Bitcoin, you can take a look at this Bitcoin video that I have set up from yesterday. Basically just telling you about whether or not we think that Bitcoin has topped, and also, we seem to be going for a little bit of correction here. How far are we going to go down? Please try this video, kind of share my thoughts. The too long didn't read version or didn't listen version is, I think it's probably not likely that Bitcoin has stopped, and there is a possibility that Bitcoin might go through a little bit of deeper correction, but it doesn't have to. I guess that's kind of the gist of this video. But I also have shared with you on X, I just posted this probably closer to about half an hour ago. I was trying to compare the timing between this Mara bump from the last time over here during the last cycle, right? I'm trying to find out an equivalent spot around the last cycle where you have a big going up and just kind of gone sideways over here. And I was trying to figure out whether or not I can see a correlate from the last cycle over here. This is a weekly chart for Mara, overstacked weekly chart of the IWM, which is the small caps, Russell 2000 index fund, and this was stacking against Bitcoin. A lot of people have been extremely frustrated because Bitcoin has just been going up like in a straight line in a parabolic type manner. It's finally kind of cooling off, whereas IWM, it did kind of go up a little bit in the same time. It's not quite as impulsive, but it's kind of still kind of going up here over this period of time. Whereas a lot of these Bitcoin miners have just kind of gone nowhere, gone sideways, ranging up and down. And a lot of people really has been showing a lot of fear in terms of, hey, Bitcoin's all the way up here. What if it corrects all the way down to like 58K or 54K or 50K? The miners have already taken a significant hit over here. It doesn't mean that it's going to keep dropping down to like the 11, 10 single digit range. There are a lot of people who have a lot of fear. So, Mara's already dropped like 50%. Like, does it have to drop more, right? So instead of trying to just speculate to say, oh, this is going to happen because Bitcoin's going to go for an ABC correction based on Elliott wave, which is, we all know it's not like an absolute science. When you do Elliott waves, you're supposed to come up with various scenarios, and there are supposed to be invalidate points and things like that. None of this is absolute, right? If you also look at the way that Bitcoin has corrected right now, it's kind of going up, kind of going down, kind of forming a little bit of a BART pattern over here. And this is kind of Bitcoin's personality during a bull market. Like, it does that. On a bear market, it forms these BARTs and just keeps going down. On the bull market, it keeps on going up like that. It forms these BARTs, but eventually these rectangles would end and it would just continue and resume its bull trend, right? I mean, that's what kind of Bitcoin does during a bull cycle. So there's no guarantee necessarily I have to go down further, but it could. And if it's ended up going further, then so be it. I mean, sure, these are correlated assets, but are they really that correlated though? And also another thing to look at over here too is what happened around the same time from the last cycle when Bitcoin is really kind of going parabolic like that. And IWM just kind of went up just a little tiny bit, and Mara actually ended up just kind of go down, right? There was a very much of a correlate period that happened before November 2020, before IWM really started pumping. And you end up having Bitcoin all the way from, you really down Bitcoin all the way from like July or so of 2020, going up all the way to around November. It went sideways for weeks, over here, under a consolidation zone right here. When IWM just kind of went up a little bit, just kind of like it did, so far, before pumping up again. And Mara actually dropped pretty significantly down during this period. I mean, can you imagine how frustrated holders are seeing Bitcoin kind of just going straight up for months when Mara just kind of made like a little bit of like a lower high, and everybody's just kind of freaking out, like it's definitely going to make another lower low because it's already making a lower high here. This is like a bear trend. So a lot of people have really gotten freaked out over here. Although it's been a few years ago, those people can potentially tell you, but even they might have forgotten, right? We're having a very, very similar pattern over here so far. So after this consolidation range over here, for whatever reason, we don't really know exactly why that is doing that. Maybe because it's kind of outperformed Bitcoin during this spike right here. Kind of like over here, maybe we've outperformed Bitcoin during this spike right here, and it just needed to consolidate and range around here a little bit. Maybe the rumors are true that there's a bunch of dilution when it comes to these Bitcoin miners, and there's more supply that needs to be eaten up before it starts to go these, crazy parabolic moves. Because the truth is, these Bitcoin miners, they hold Bitcoin mining machines. I mean, the Bitcoin mining machines during a parabolic move of Bitcoin is going to be extremely valuable. Especially after halving, you would imagine that halving means that the miner is going to get half the rewards, which is partially true, but on the other hand, it's difficult to say whether or not it was already kind of priced in before the halving occurs. By the way, the halving is coming soon. I think we only have about 5 days or so before Bitcoin halving is coming, and that does serve as a little bit of like a negative catalyst for miners, because you would imagine that the reward that the miners get would be slashed in half. It's going to cause significant problems with their revenue, etc., etc. But the truth is that maybe a big part of it is also being priced in beforehand, because if you look at how Mara performed last time when it had a Bitcoin halving, price actually went up afterwards, after Bitcoin halving. So there's really no guarantee to say Bitcoin halving is like a very, very, very bad event for miners who are able to survive through it, who are able to thrive through it, because there's an expectation that even with some volatility, Bitcoin halving, even there's a little bit like a sell the news kind of thing, if it ends up dropping a lot further, there's no guarantee that, the miners are going to end up, just absolutely crashing. Like, so far there's not really any indication that's the case. On top of that, you also have a lot of institutions that are just buying in over the last year. You can see that on fintel.io. First of all, if you just exit out this chart right here, you look at fintel.io, currently there's more than 40% institutional ownership for Mara. And if you actually look at the chart in terms of what institutional ownership has been, as things probably just kind of consolidate sideways over here, it's been going up and up, it's been exponential. Now, this is no way to tell you that Mara is not topping. I mean, sure, of course, there's possibility where you have exponential growth in institutional ownership of Mara stock shares, and it could still end up being a very significant top for the cycle. Just like over here, actually end up having increased institutional ownership, even as you continue to have, a little bit of like a peaking over here. But they continue to keep on holding, right? A big part of it is because I think that it might be a lot of insiders that have been selling to institutions just kind of gobbling up their shares throughout the entire time because they expect that to continue to go up higher. But it's hard to say, for sure, but it certainly looks like the smart money is definitely holding Mara. And when you're talking about institutional ownership, you're really talking about the big boys over here, Vanguard and BlackRock. Like all these guys are holding a pretty significant amount of shares. BlackRock actually holds like close to about 10% of the institutional, like of the overall shares of Mara. So the big boys are buying, right? And you're really talking about a pattern where things are just kind of consolidating over here sideways after it makes like a significant impulsive move over here, which it did over here too. I mean, a lot of people got really euphoric about Mara as it went from, the single digits all the way up to maybe like around the 20s and 30s. A lot of people got absolutely euphoric over here and got trapped over here, and you're just basically consolidating over here. Very, very similar consolidation happened during last cycle, and you see that IWM could go up and Bitcoin could go a lot further. But eventually, when Mara is able to catch a break, when it is its turn after a few months of consolidation, when it's its turn, it does tend to want to go a lot further, a lot more parabolic than what Bitcoin did, actually. So we'll see what happens. I mean, none of this are a guarantee, right? These are just thoughts. I'm just basically showing you a pattern that I'm kind of seeing before. It's something for you to kind of think about, right? So let's get to the Mara chart here in terms of what I think is actually doing. I'm going to go to the monthly. I'm also going to show you what I'm thinking in terms of institutional buying in. And that was just institution, right? You're not just talking about institution, you're also talking about whales. There's a lot of big money that could end up accumulating, behind the scenes. They're not showing up Intel. There are also whales as well, right? So if you end up actually pulling the Black Cat L3 banker fund flow trend oscillator here, you can kind of see what happened during the last cycle when you have a very, very similar pattern that I was showing you when, Mara is just kind of consolidating over here, forming some lows over here. Everybody gets super freaked out when Bitcoin just kind of going straight up during this period. You actually end up having institutional accumulation. You can see that there's actually an increase in wealth fund inflow during this period of time, and until eventually wealth fund just exponentially grow up, push all the way up. You end up having this big giant monthly candle over here around November 2020. Right now, I think we're experiencing some very similar phenomena where you continue to have increase in inflow, and you might end up having a little bit of consolidation. If anything, price kind of gone down there a little bit, just kind of like how it did over here, right? When you have this increase in institutional inflow that has been happening for months and months and months and months, and this actually correlate with the data from Fintel.io, by the way, when price just kind of went sideways, there's a lot of energy that's being built up. And again, I'm talking about the monthly chart. I'm not talking about, because I'm showing you monthly chart bullish on the monthly time frame, that won't necessarily go down to like 13, 14, 12, 11. Like there's always that possibility. And I can kind of show you a little bit in terms of where I think the support levels are for Mara. But so far, it doesn't really make a whole lot of sense, does it, in terms of institutional inflow, going up and, probably just kind of goes sideways and down. And you also see a very similar pattern from the last cycle too, where the underlying asset of Bitcoin just kind of go up and Mara just kind of goes sideways, getting everybody super frustrated. A lot of weekends are kind of being shaken over here by consolidation zone right here. They might end up chasing, instead of chasing Bitcoin miners, they might end up chasing, altcoins. And you see what happened with altcoins this past weekend. It tanked a lot of them tanked like 25, 30, 40%. That would be like the worst strategy if you like look at miners, you get frustrated about them, and you're like, okay, forget this. I'm gonna like just sell all of them and get into altcoins. Like that's probably not the best strategy. But anyway, if you look at the bank fund flow indicator, it does suggest that we're at a very, very similar juncture over here as opposed to over here. That's one thought, right? The other thought is, and I keep on just showing you the same thing over and over again because nothing has really changed. You have the Ichimoku cloud analysis, which gives you two lines. One is the Tenkan, the other one is Kijun. When these two cross, it's supposed to be a bullish cross. Tenkan is a leading line, Kijun is a lagging line. When they cross, it's supposed to be a bullish cross that tells you that you have a longer, more sustainable bull trend that can last for anywhere up to like 12 to 18 months. Over here on the last cycle, this lasts for up to about 12 months or so when it starts to go up, because the top was really around here, right? But then over here on this cycle, it had just had that cross, and we still haven't really had that candle going up yet. But so far, it's still indicative of that there's a bull trend going on in terms of monthly trend, right? That's what the Ichimoku cloud analysis is telling you. And there's a good chance when you have the cross over here that happen, there's a good chance that within a few months or so, you might end up going up and challenge the Ichimoku cloud above of it, especially if the Tenkan and Kijun can go up together along with price to serve as support like it did over here, to kind of push it inside the cloud, maybe even potentially above the cloud over here. And we'll see how far this pent-up energy over the last 2 years is giving us, see how much juice we end up having in terms of going up. But there's a significant amount of accumulation over here over time, and this accumulation is shown by having increase in volume buying and also decrease in volume selling. There's a lot of accumulation that has already happened, as shown by what the institutions have been showing us over time too, right? So there's been a tremendous amount of accumulation that has happened over the last couple of years. So what you're seeing here is a bunch of pent-up energy, bullish cross here, the Ichimoku cloud with the Tenkan and Kijun cross. And you're also seeing, together with the confluence, if you pull up the Bollinger Bands, you also see a very, very similar pattern where around here, where you have the consolidation zone right here, the 20-month moving average has really changed tide here from trending down, down, down like this for a long time to turning flat and now uptrending. I think we're basically seeing a very, very similar pattern here. We do have a little bit of consolidation here, and we end up having a little slight, Bollinger Band contraction here, like we had over here, a little bit of Bollinger Band contraction over here. But eventually, once price kind of worked out itself, it might even potentially, who knows, it might even potentially come back and bounce from the rising 20-month moving average before going up. There's always that possibility, right? Right now, the 20-month moving average is 12.77. If you give it another month or so, my suspicion is going to continue to go up, right? So the next thing you know, it might be end up like 13 or maybe at 14 or something like that over the next month or two. If it end up needing to kind of go back test it, kind of like it did over here, back test the 20-month moving average, just really flattening and pointing up. I see that we might be at a very, very similar juncture here and here, just like we showed you in terms of what happened in correlation with IWM, in correlation with Bitcoin, just like what I'm showing you here with the Ichimoku cloud analysis, just like what I'm showing you with the whale fund inflow. The same thing is happening with the Bollinger Band, with the 20-month moving average showing you a change in trend from bearish to bullish, And we're looking at kind of like a very, very similar area where price is challenging the upper Bollinger Band here, but didn't quite have enough juice to kind of really truly break above the upper Bollinger Band, push the upper Bollinger Band a little higher. But I think it will. Like the setup so far is very, very similar. And there's a potential chance, a good chance if I had to say, and I'm putting my money in it, a good chance that it's probably going to end up happening. Now, the key though too is if you're looking at this, does that mean that we're going to end up going up from here, or does it mean that we're going to have having a little bit of a downtrend before going up? It's hard to say, how much further we're going to end up going. I did show you that the 20-month moving average right here is 12.77, right? There's always a chance it could end up revisiting that. Right now we're kind of trying to backtest this whole very important level over here, and it does seem like it's kind of dipping below that here a little bit, and it could end up dipping below here for a little while. Who knows? But especially if we're seeing weakness in Bitcoin, which a lot of people are really freaked out about. Bitcoin didn't really drop that much by Friday, and Mara had dropped like 8.5% on Friday. So Bitcoin dropped further this past weekend. It hasn't really even recovered back to where it closed. So it doesn't mean that Mara's going to end up dropping a lot further. Maybe on Monday, especially on the news of this Middle East conflict. There are a lot of speculation, a lot of question, a lot of fear that's heading, through this weekend into Monday. Could there end up being a little bit of a gap down on Monday or big gap down on Monday, and you end up having a lot of buying pressure that could come in? That's certainly a possibility. It's hard to say for sure. All I can say is like prices already dropped all the way from like 34 on the top of here to around 16. I mean, this is a greater than 50% drop from its high, which you really expect that there's going to be a lot more selling pressure coming in. I don't know, right? If you look at the volume profile over here, you can see that a lot of the buying is with big volume has happened over here. And a lot of the selling on declining volume has already happened, right? Another big bouts of buying over here. And then you also have about weeks number 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 of like just downtrending kind of nonstop on declining volume, right? So a lot of the selling volume seems to be getting more and more exhausted. And you could end up having the market makers just end up gapping down a lot further to kind of test some of the lower levels down here to see whether or not there's any demand before pushing the price up. There's always that possibility, although we don't really know for sure, right? If you do a Fibonacci level here, I'm just going to roughly do the last all-time high over here. And I'm going to roughly draw from the cycle low, which is right around there. It's not the most precise, but it's close enough, right? So what you're going to see here is pretty clear, actually. Price has been bouncing between two of these important Fibonacci levels. Price has been bouncing from the 0.382, which is around 34 bucks, to around the 0.136 over here, which is the 14 bucks level. Do you have a lot of price history over here on 14? Yes, you do. Yes, you do. Resistance, 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 right? Would it be surprising if it ends up going all the way down to like 14 and back test that as support? No. Would it be conceivable that it could end up doing that twice before going up further? No, I think it's entirely possible that it could end up doing that. And if it end up doing that, then I mean that you might even have further de-risking, right? Because the sellers have already been selling for quite some time with declining volume. That's one thing, like, even though you're seeing declining volume and selling is getting exhausted, you don't know. I mean, this could still be potentially be a dropping knife and still end up going down a lot further before it balances up. But the very truth is that when it's selling on declining volume like this, it does make you think that, hey, the commitments from the bears, from the sellers are really not that much anymore. At some point, whenever this ends up breaking, all it needs is just to have like increasing buying volume for you to really push out of this range and past some of the higher areas. So I do think that so far, the lower it goes, the better reward, risk reward profile this could be. Because right now, all this is doing is really just ranging between like 34 and maybe like 14 to 15. That's really what it's doing. And right now it's getting closer to the bottom of the range than it is on the top of the range. So traders love this. And I think at some point there's going to be traders coming in and say, hey, this looks like a good risk reward ratio. I'm going to end up buying. And on top of that, you're also having, accumulation of institution to kind of try and set a floor price. So institution, they don't really pump, right? Traders do that. Traders pump it up and sell it and tank it down. But institution accumulation just keeps on coming in. They're here to try and set up a floor, if you will. So the more institutional accumulation, like you're seeing over here with Fintel, the stronger the floor is going to be. And what you end up seeing here is that the trader is just having a fun time going up and down so far. But eventually the range is going to be broken. It could end up having a little bit of a false breakdown to the downside before going up. And I do want to see it actually, if you end up bring it down below and you end up spiking some pretty big volume over here, that would end up being a nice spring to kind of push the price all the way back out above, right? But would I be surprised if price just kind of ends around like 15, 16 and ends up, going up from here? No, I would not be surprised by that at all. I'm not really interested in trading these kind of small moves. I mean, I'm not even interested in trading these kinds of moves. Like, that's not, like the 50%, 40%, 50% moves are like not really what I'm personally interested in. I'm more interested in riding the whole the Bitcoin bull cycle, not the Bullcoin bit cycle, the Bitcoin bull cycle that can go up and give you like 100% of gain, right? And right now this seems like it might just be like a reaccumulation as you're seeing here on the volume profile, as you're seeing here on the L3, banker fund oscillator, as you're seeing on the fintel.io data. This just seems to be a reaccumulation range while the traders are having a fun time, whales are accumulating. In terms of whether or not you're going to end up buying from like 16, 14, 12, 10 even, or like 18, 20, 25. I mean, like, I'm not sure if it matters too much if this ends up just being a little bit of a bleep before the real big move comes, right? Like, I'm not really sure if it matters so much if it ends up somewhere around here. I mean, obviously, if you buy up here, then you're probably not using the best risk assessment tools because you're basically foaming up here in the local top, right? But if in the early innings of the Bitcoin cycle, and again, watch my Bitcoin video from yesterday to kind of tell you where I think we're in the cycle. But in the early to mid innings of the Bitcoin cycle, having these kinds of, sell off over here, unless if you sell at the lows down here, I think you might be experiencing some short-term pain, a lot of short-term pain, but that might ultimately end up being a lot of long-term gain potentially, right? So I mean, I don't know, to each their own. I don't know whether or not I can time it perfect or that I can say, oh, I'm not going to buy into 14. It's definitely going to go down to 14, or it's definitely going to go down lower. There's a little bit of a weekly gap down here to that people are eyeing. Oh, it's definitely going down to like 13.7 closest gap. Those are some of the key levels down below. If you really have to look, is 14 is one because of the Fibonacci level, because of the range, because of the previous resistance 1, 2, and 3 here. That's certainly an important level. It could go down, a little bit down to like 13.7 to close the gap. There's always that possibility, right? There's too many people just looking at the gap and end up not closing because price have dropped down like more than 50% in just like 7 weeks. What if it doesn't end up doing that and it just ends up forming a little bit of like a higher low and just bounces up from here because volume is exhausting? That's also a possibility. Well, but you're saying, hey, Bitcoin has dropped a lot this weekend. It could potentially go down to like 58K or lower, and that would just be a normal part of Bitcoin correction, and more has to go down together with it. Then I say, yeah, I mean, I can see that as a possibility too. But those are some of the lower levels you can kind of watch out for, right? If you're doing a little bit of a different story here, if you want to look at the volume shelves over here, you can see that there's a tremendous amount of support down here below too. And we just talked about the Fibonacci level around 14, which is going to be around the bottom of this volume shelf here. Basically, price has been oscillating between this level, around 34 and lower level around 14. And you can see that it's basically bouncing between these two twin peaks right here, bouncing up and down between these two volume shelves over here. It's not really doing a whole lot, right? Right now, we're testing down the bottom volume shelf over here, which should have a lot of support. Who knows, heaven forbid, if it ends up dropping down on that, you have a pretty strong support here around 13.5. So you have some pretty strong support over here, like 12.67. So the lower it goes, the more, reward you might potentially end up having. So I'm actually not sure, like, it doesn't matter to me as far as I'm concerned. I mean, maybe I'm wrong if I end up losing a bunch of money because I've been, too arrogant in calling that, this is nowhere near the top. This looks like this, all these blah, blah, blah. Like, I could be completely wrong. But I'm showing you my reasoning. I'm showing you my logic. And I'm also showing you what tools I use to make the assessment that I'm making. And this is by no means telling you what to do. This is by no means trying to pump the stock because, I mean, honestly, I just told you it could potentially go down lower to close the gap at around like 13.7. There's no guarantee it's going to do that, but I mean, that's certainly a possibility, right? So I'm not going to like sit here and just say, yeah, I'm just pumping this, but I am in this. It's one of my bigger positions, and I've been keep on adding during this downtrend over here because the lower it gets, the more potential reward I see this being. So whatever I can do, I might just continue to keep watching, adding to as much as I can. But that's kind of those are kind of my thoughts here. Now, I also want to show you a tool here I don't really use a whole lot because it is open to a lot of subjectivity, if you will. But there's an interesting tool here with the anchor, volume, the VWAP over here. It's interesting tool because it tells you at some point, starting from like some point in the past, what is the average price that the holders currently are having, right? So for example, I think a lot of people who end up buying more recently around here, their price is going to be higher than what the current price is. If you end up buying through this over here, your average price is going to end up being like a little bit above, and this could potentially serve as a little bit of resistance, right? But I just kind of wanted to show you, I think it's very interesting too. I don't use this a lot, but if you buy it down here, you most likely also going to buy up, end up buying over here, and your average price is also going to be, slightly above, and this could also serve as a little bit of resistance, right? So most of the recent buyers, if you buy over here, most of the recent buyers are probably at like a slight loss right now, which is a little bit, alarming. But it's not just the recent buyers. If you bought like longer term, let's say you bought over here, you can see that the VWAP actually is right around where the current price is. I have my setting of the VWAP, just by about, how do you say that? I'm just going to pull that over here. I have my VWAP setting with just a slight bit of multiplier by about 5% or so, and I'm only really showing the upper band over here. So you have a little bit of upper band and the actual VWAP over here. You can see that this VWAP actually, if I click down here, it actually has served as pretty decent support throughout the entire time, right? And we're right back over here. So could it be that we're already at support if we end up drawing it down from the cycle low? Possibly, right? So that's another reason why I'm saying that I'm not trading these moves, because for all I know, it could end up being bottom already. If you look at a VWAP from more recent times, yeah, sure. I mean, you're hitting resistance, and that, but you're supposed to draw these VWAPs at like key pivot points on this weekly chart. If you end up drawing that down here on the cycle low, you're right there. I mean, like that, your average price is right there. So this could potentially end up being some pretty decent support. Again, you're also talking about the Middle East conflict. You're talking about SPY or S&P 500 correction, Bitcoin corrections. There are a lot of fears in the air this weekend. So maybe they turn out to be right, maybe they turn out to be wrong. I don't know for sure. All I know is that currently, right now, it actually tends to be a little bit of a stronger support level, because if you draw the VWAP, it is right there at that location. Potentially a little bit lower, but I think we're at potentially a key support here. If not, there are some supports further down below. If you're also looking at the weekly chart, if I pull up the Ichimoku cloud, you're talking about the top of the cloud being around like the 12s. Could it drop all the way down there? There's always a possibility. There's going to be a lot of, kind of these horizontal zone of history over here around, 12 range, right? So could it drop all the way down if it's that brutal, if it's a falling knife on low volume? Maybe, but if it's low volume, crap. I mean, like if it keeps on dropping down low volume like that, I think it's going to be a lot more attractive the lower it goes from here, right? But I'm not sure if it's necessarily going to drop down that low. The other things to show you is the moving averages. So if I just pull up the 20, 50, and 100, price right now currently is under the 20-week moving average. It's getting close to 50 now. 50 is positive pointing, and 50 right now is around 15.06. So around 15, you might end up having some pretty decent support over here too. Nobody knows how far it's going to go. This could be it based on the VWAP from the cycle low. That could be it right here. It could drop down to 50. I just showed you 15-week moving average just pointing up around 15. It could drop down to volume shelf levels down below around 13.5. It can drop down all the way to like the weekly Ichimoku cloud level around like 12-ish. It can end up closing this gap here around 13.7. There's a lot of lower levels as potential support here. And the lower it goes, the better reward ratio is, as far as I'm concerned, because this is declining volume over here with reduced and commitment from sellers. So I think it just needs, we just need to wait. Like currently we have a buyer strike. All you really need is just to have some buyer, have some increased pickup in volume for this to really starting to go, beast mode. We currently don't have that. Currently it's just been unfortunately a lot of decline over here in terms of bearish energy, lack of commitment, selling, but still end up dropping price down by a lot. That's what happens, But there's a buyer strike, that's what happens. Just like over here, you have declining volume over here. as price kind of going down like this. You have declining volume over here. But all it takes is just maybe like, some buying pressure to come in. And all these down moves over here can potentially be erased by just like one candle here and another candle over here, right? This is what happens when you have these low volume, low commitment selling. And personally, based on my personal opinion, the lower it gets, maybe potentially higher reward you're going to end up getting. Man, that's a lot of talking on just Mara. Am I going to make this like a whole hour video? Let's try something else because I can do timestamps. I'm just going to end up adding another stock here that's basically doing essentially the same thing, which is Bitfarms. Bitfarms is doing the exact same thing. It's bouncing between the 0.382 level and the 0.136 Fibonacci retracement levels. It's just been bouncing between these two, forming a little bit like a megaphone kind of pattern, which generally is a continuation pattern when it's done. It's back testing some of the key horizontal zone levels over here, and one of the key levels is going to be up here at these peaks. It could not find the support here this time around, even though the price is going down on significantly decreasing volume, especially over here with this big giant drop over here. Last week, the volume of that was a lot lower than the other selling volume over here. It's been down for about 8 straight weeks. It went all the way down from, you're talking about the peak of this downtrend of like 3.91, getting close to $4. It's dropped down to 1.8. So you're talking about greater than 50% correction already on declining volume. How much lower is it going to get? We don't know. Is it just like nobody wants Bitcoin miners anymore? It's just trash because they're diluting so much, and there's just like so much stock around that you shouldn't really even consider getting into something like that. That's always a possibility, right? But I'm just not sure if I necessarily buy into the narrative, because Bitcoin miners dilute. Like, that's what they do, is like water's wet, right? Regardless, you still end up having a lot of institutional buying in, right? So what ends up happening here is, if you look at fintel.io, and this is a very, very easy search. You just look at fintel.io. Down here, you can also see that it's going through a very, very similar exponential increase in institutional ownership, not just for Mara, but also for Bitfarms. Over the last half a year or so, it's been exponential, right? So if you try to validate this over here with, let's say, the Black Cat banker fund flow, yeah, you see an increase in institutional inflow, but you're seeing a decline in prices down here. So either they're diluting it so fast that it doesn't matter, it's not keeping up the paces of institutional buying, or something doesn't really add up, between the two. There's a little bit of discrepancy between the two here and there. So I think there's probably a little bit of discrepancy between the two here, in terms of what price is doing and in terms of what the institutions are doing. You can also see even on the monthly chart that buying pressure with volume is like straight up, where selling pressure seems to be going down. Right? Granted, this is only halfway through the month, so let's just multiply the current selling pressure times 2. It's still gonna be like a declining selling volume over here. Like, this whole thing has just been dropping on declining volume, which means the sellers are actually a little bit non-committal. But nevertheless, it's bouncing between two key Fibonacci levels over here, and that's what it does. That's what it does, right? It ends up just ranging over here for about 4 or 5 months. Then so be it. You're gonna be very happy if you're a trader, but I'm not gonna end up trading this move over here. Like, that really honestly doesn't concern me that much. If you're looking for some of the other indicators to help you in terms of what you think is going on, you just look right here on the volume shelf. Over the last few months, it's just been bouncing between the top volume shelf over here and this bottom volume shelf down here. It's just been bouncing between this zone right around here and forming this kind of whiplash kind of stuff over here. Now, kind of giving you a little bit more in terms of the other indicators and what Bitfarms could be doing. The Ichimoku cloud, you did end up having a bullish cross, a bullish Tenkan Kijun cross right here. The price has dropped below both of these. So it's kind of a little bit of a wash. It's hard for me to say what that means, but I do like the fact it had a bullish cross. In terms of the Bollinger Band, it's looking basically just like Mara. Initially have like a Bollinger Band expansion, and the shorting month moving average is pointing up. But this looks exactly just like Mara, where you're starting to get enough consolidation here. Bollinger Band starts to kind of contract a little bit. Currently, we don't really have the data from the last cycle, but if you look at Mara from Mara's last cycle, with a little bit of consolidation over here, touching the top part of the upper Bollinger Band, you might end up, having, once price is done consolidating, once whales are done with accumulation, you might end up having, some potentially pretty explosive price action here going on. I've shown this for like months now. Like none of these things are anything that should be new to you. In terms of looking at the weekly, a couple of things I want to show on the weekly here too. One is it a bull trend? It is still a bull trend. Is it finding some potential support here? Yes, it is finding some potential support here at the 50 week moving average, which is at 1.78. It's right around there. Could it go down further and go down beneath it? Yes, it can. Is this something that I'm scared about in terms of the downtrend? No, I'm not, because look at the weekly volume. It's just been pathetically going down and down and down. All it takes is just for a little bit of buying volume like it did over here to reverse all of these bearish price action and to go higher, potentially to $5. So I'm not really that worried, but can it go down further? Can it go down to like 1.44, down at the 100 week moving average? Sure, that's always a possibility, but am I expecting it to go down that far? No, right? I mean, I don't know in terms of what to say about it. It's still a bull trend. It's a little bit scary to some because it did kind of lose the higher low here, right? Like right now it's forming a little bit of like a lower low compared to here. There are some people, if you really like, it's not the end of the world, because if you really want to like draw patterns, you can draw this like megaphone pattern, which is technically still a continuation pattern that looks like a megaphone. Like it's not the end of the world. Although I don't like to just keep drawing lines and trying to justify for what I think is going to happen. But currently, looking at the volume, it's just been telling me, hey, it's, yeah, the lower it goes, the higher, the better reward is going to be. And I think it's just basically ranging between these two Fibonacci levels, around $4 and around 1.68 or somewhere around there. So that's kind of what I'm seeing in terms of what Bitfarms is doing. Some of the other indicators I like to pull up the unbalanced volume. Unbalanced volume basically is a way to kind of calculate these volumes and see whether or not they're BSing you, whether or not there's the selling is happening with minimal impact in price, but with significant impact on the unbalanced volume here, which tells you that the selling is actually not very high pressure at all. If anything, the selling pressure has really significantly had declined, and you're talking about some bullish divergence here. What I meant by bullish divergence here is, let me show you. Price has gone up a lot when the unbalanced volume has just continued to just go down. This is basically being reset over here. This is what we call a hidden bullish divergence, where the price goes up and the indicator goes down. And this fits the whole volume profile over here. Like there's just been a lot of really pathetic low volume selling that's just keeps on going on and on for about like 8 weeks now. But I'm not really convinced, if you will. The other indicator I can pull up here, one that everybody typically use, is the RSI. If you use the RSI, a couple of things here to look at is actually the whole thing is like RSI has already kind of been reset from here to here. If anything, it's kind of gone down a little bit, right? Kind of like what the unbalanced volume is doing. If anything, price has just kind of gone down a little bit. Sorry, RSI just kind of gone down a little tiny bit, straight to down, right? But you're talking about the price has gone down by a lot. So RSI has reset all the way down to these lower levels, but price has gone down significantly from the lower levels right here, right? Getting close to double over here. So you're talking about RSI reset. This is also a hidden bullish divergence here with a weekly RSI here as well. So The key thing is that you have some bullish momentum that's building up. The volume is actually calling the bears BS, if you will. And this chart looked very, very similar to Mara's chart, so I just basically am looming these together with Mara. It's been getting a little bit long here on this video. I think I'm gonna end here, but I still think that it's a pretty cool thing to discuss this because a lot of people are making assumptions, and I'm basically trying to show you the data that I'm seeing. So anyway, thank you so much for listening to this long video. I'm sorry, I'm going to try to keep it a lot shorter next time. Have a good one. Bye.